In this video, you're going to be learning exactly how stability works in the division, why the stable talent isn't anywhere near as useful as you thought it was, and how you need to be rolling and recalibrating your weapons for maximum stability and DPS gain. Stick around. Hello and welcome back, it's Skill Up here. Time for another round of old-fashioned weapon testing. It's been a long time since I've really sat in the gun range for a day and just kept shooting shit, so it's good to be back in the saddle doing what I love best, figuring out how this bloody game works. So today's video was actually going to be about the SVD marksman rifle, which is a very, very strong marksman rifle that I sadly won't be speaking about today, because in my testing of this weapon, I stumbled upon something which I think is a lot more important to talk about, and that's the way that stability works in the division, and in particular, what impact the stable talent has on overall weapon performance. But before I talk about stable, let's spend a few moments talking about the three types of stability in the division and how they work, because it's actually quite complex and counterintuitive in and of itself. It's something that I've covered in a fair amount of detail in the past, but I'm just going to provide a quick recap for you now. So there are actually three types of stability in the division. There's stability, there's horizontal stability, and there's initial bullet stability. These three values all relate to the recoil of your weapon, and that is sort of the movement of your reticle. They have absolutely nothing to do with the size, shape, or growth of your reticle. So it's about where your reticle is, not how big your reticle is. It's a very important difference. Stability, the stat stability, pertains specifically to vertical recoil, or how much your weapon pulls up when you fire when you aren't trying to control it. This is particularly pronounced on things like assault rifles or fast rate of fire marksman rifles. Horizontal stability is how much your reticle will move left or right when you fire. Interestingly enough, this value is tuned so that it has a very random or erratic effect. Your gun pulling up when you fire it is very predictable, but the left and right movement of your weapon is actually fairly random. Sometimes when you fire, your reticle will pull left, other times it will pull right, and other times it actually won't move at all. Horizontal stability essentially reduces the size of these movements when they do occur, rather than reducing the frequency of these movements altogether. Finally, initial bullet stability reduces the horizontal and vertical recoil of your weapon on the very first shot that is fired within a set interval of time. So this value is actually reset when the weapon is stabilized after a pattern of fire. For example, if I fire one bullet every half a second with an M1A, that's just fast enough for the weapon recoil to keep building up, and the weapon will become more and more difficult to manage, right? But if I wait just a touch longer, say an extra 0.2 of a second, then the recoil pattern on the M1A will settle down, and the effect of initial bullet stability will be present the next time I fire, making that next bullet more stable. This makes initial bullet stability somewhat useful on slow rate of fire weapons like an M44 or an M870 shotgun, but pretty much terrible on any type of automatic weapon. So, which of these is the best? Well, first up, don't really bother with initial bullet stability pretty much ever. Essentially, when you have enough time for this effect to come into use, enough time between shots, you've essentially got enough time to manage the recoil of your weapon and recenter it. In this way, initial bullet stability is actually a really poor stat choice that I would never recommend, and it's actually a really poor addition to the new Deadeye gear set, since this set is actually very much built around very high rates of fire, so it really makes no sense at all that initial bullet stability is on this gear set. Horizontal stability is a really important stat to have on your weapons for a number of reasons, but in particular, assault rifles and fast rate of fire marksman rifles such as the M1A really benefit from this. On an SMG, however, horizontal stability is practically pointless and provides you no real benefit. One really easy test you can do is to fire a weapon with no mods on it and without adjusting for the recoil. If the weapon goes straight up without moving left or right, it means that you actually don't need to put any horizontal stability on that weapon whatsoever. A lot of SMGs do fall into this category. Finally, we have vertical stability, or just stability, which is a really important stat on pretty much any weapon except those that fire really slowly, such as the M44, since you have more than enough time to adjust your reticle in between each shot. Anything else though, you're generally going to need a fair amount of stability to keep the weapon in check, especially assault rifles. So that's a brief overview of stability, but here's where things get even more interesting and more complicated. In your character sheet is a stat called stability. This is actually an amalgamation of all three types of stability rolled up into one number. You'd have hoped that this would be a simple sort of 1/3 from each, but this isn't actually the case. It turns out that each sort of stability stat value is weighted differently in this equation, with initial bullet stability having the lowest impact on total stability, followed by stability, followed by horizontal stability having the most impact on that overall number. So what the game is essentially saying is that horizontal stability will give you more total stability than vertical stability will, which I think is an accurate reflection of in-game performance. So I think this is actually quite good the way this has been tuned. The exact coefficients for these values escape me, however, as during this analysis I also learned that all of the numbers driving the stability calculation were very inconsistent. In some instances, mods that I applied to my weapon would give me more than 10% total stability than they should be by the numbers. And in other instances, they were giving me nearly 20% less than they should be. So it was a very incoherent mess as I was looking at it. And I think a lot of this can be explained by understanding something else that I discovered while I was looking at this, and that's that stability actually has diminishing returns values that kick in when you approach around 50 total stability. Diminishing returns are essentially caps on your stats that makes the next stat that you pile on less effective than the one you put on before it. So for instance, if I have 100 stamina and that means I'll have 100 health, just as an example, right? So in that instance, there's a 1-to-1 value between health and stamina. If, however, diminishing returns were then applied and I pushed to say 110 stamina, maybe I'd only have 105 health, meaning that those 10 stamina points that I got above 100 stamina are actually only worth 0.5 health each, as opposed to being, that 1-to-1 value that we saw before. So with stability, I can't quite determine the exact diminishing returns rate, but I do know that once we get to around 50 stability, things really start to drop off hard, and we start seeing way less stats per point in stability or horizontal stability. So just to recap very briefly, there are three types of stability, but there's only two that you should really care about: stability and horizontal stability. Both of these are very important depending on which gun you are using. When modding for stability, expect to reach a total cap on stability at around 50 or 60, as this is generally where you'll land with most guns if you put stability on both your underbarrel and your muzzle. So why is this important? I mean, if I hit the cap with 2 mods and I only have 2 mod slots, isn't that a good thing? Doesn't it mean that this kind of already works, right? Well, yes and no. I mean, here's another thing that I learned while I was looking into all of this. Most of you would be familiar with the stable talent, which claims to increase weapon stability by up to 50% on average. I've always thought that this talent was great because I've really just been taking it at face value all of the time. What I've since learned is that this talent gives you only a fraction of the total stability that it claims to. This talent should give you 50% total stability, but on my M60 it gave me 26%, on my M1A it gave me 21%, on my P416 assault rifle it gave me only 15%, and on my SVD marksman rifle it gave me 25%. So either this stat is bugged or it's doing some really funky stuff in the background that we don't know about to arrive at that value. So being totally confused, I do what I usually do. I spoke with my friend Thylander, or Weapons Guy as he's known on the state of the game. He is the lead weapons designer at Massive, and he's someone that I chat to from time to time when I'm really stuck on something, and he clarified for me that the stable talent only applies to vertical stability, not horizontal stability or initial bullet stability. It's for this reason that this talent only provides a fraction of what it should. It literally provides no benefit whatsoever to the 2 other types of stability in the game, which is obviously very important in the case of horizontal stability, since both the game calculations or weightings and my own personal in-game experience indicate that horizontal stability is typically a far more valuable stat than vertical stability, depending on the gun that you are using. So right now, I'm not going to call this talent useless, but I'm definitely willing to relegate it to the bottom tier. In my comparison, which I have linked in the description below, across an M60, an M1A, a P416, and and an SVD, this talent provided an average of about 6 extra stability, or a total of 6% increase since stability is measured 1 to 100. Further, the actual difference between this talent being present on your weapon and not being present is almost indistinguishable if you look to mod up to the 50 plus stability mark, which I've mentioned below, due to things like diminishing returns kicking in and really hitting the overall efficacy of that talent. So even at a base level though, this is really only giving you about 6 extra stability at any point in time. So it's really not a great talent, and I would really not recommend it. I think the takeaway from all of this is that the stable talent is really not great, and it provides you with a lot less benefit than you would have hoped. You are actually far better off rolling this talent away in pursuit of a damage talent and modding your underbarrel and muzzle for your desired stability level. This is a really important finding in the context of how weapon stability works, especially in the context of the new SVD, which is just ludicrously stable and is essentially like balanced 3.0. So if you're keen for more information on that weapon, then keep an eye out for that, because I will have a video coming out on that this week. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. So that's it from me, guys. If you liked this video and you found it useful, please do drop it a like, as that helps me out in a very big way. And if you like, you can actually help me go full-time on YouTube, which is a goal that I have, by whitelisting me on your ad blocker if you think my videos are worth it. Regardless, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you watching, and I really hope you enjoyed the video. Take good care, and I'll see you in the dark zone. Bye-bye.